أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام على آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه وهو أصدق القائلين: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده ثم إليه ترجعون. صلوات على محمد. Tonight is our 12th and last session in our discussion on the origin and the return, or al-mabda' wal-ma'ad. And as a conclusion to the series, there are 3 items I would like to undertake tonight, inshallah. The first is, those of you who have been attending these lectures regularly will recall that on the second night, when we were talking about some of the objections to the use of philosophy in understanding higher theological matters, and some of the advantages of trying to understand Islam using metaphysics and philosophy, there were 1 or 2 items I did not mention, and I said we ran out of time and I will bring it up later on. So I want to just fulfill that promise. The second item is a number of brothers, either directly or through email, have requested me to suggest some tips that we could take with us in trying to get ourselves ready to undertake a spiritual journey. Not that I am qualified in any sense or any shape or form to be giving such advice, but perhaps some thoughts on it, particularly outside the methods that we all know of, the spiritual practices that we know of, like mustahab fasts and salatul layl and du'as and so on. Any other things to think about in how we conduct ourselves in life that might actually prepare the ground for us to have more spiritual experiences, inshallah. And then finally, as I've been mentioning, I've been receiving a lot of questions, especially through email, and I want to try and answer some of them, especially the ones that I feel will clarify a lot of the other matters we have discussed in the previous nights, and questions that I think a lot of us may already have, but we've not had an opportunity to discuss. So beginning with the 2 items that we might list as advantages of pursuing Islamic falsafa, or the study of metaphysics from an Islamic perspective. One of the advantages of doing that is a very common matter that we have to deal with on an ongoing basis nowadays is the issue of atheism. And a lot of our our youth and younger adults, particularly when they start going to university, they start taking classes in biology, they study the evolution theory, so on and so forth, they start entertaining these doubts. Now, what happens is that as long as I see myself as an independent reality, and I see myself as being an existence that is separate, even if I acknowledge as a child that God created me, but if I see myself as a separate, independent reality, then as I grow older and I come in contact with different individuals who have different ideas, including atheists, it puts me in a spin. It confuses me. I start thinking and having doubts: does God exist? Because I see myself as being an independent reality, and I'm trying to understand, does God exist? And why am I here? Is there a purpose to life? Why do people suffer? If there is a God, why is there evil? And so on and so forth. However, if I embrace the ideas that we have been discussing in these last 12 nights, as God being the only reality and creation being an emanation from Him, now my greater concern is not does God exist, but do I exist? Because it puts things the other way around now. So now when I question reality, when I question purpose in life, when I question the wisdom of suffering, my model changes. My worldview has changed. My perspective has changed. I'm now trying to understand, if I am real, in what sense am I real? As opposed to thinking the other way, the more arrogant way, that I am real, does God exist? Okay, so this is just one advantage. And as we said, that this coming closer to Allah is not in the physical sense. There is no spatio-temporal, taking place, nothing of that nature. So you're not crossing time and space. It is simply higher levels of awareness. So if God is the only reality, when I come to greater awareness of God, then the intensity with which I now manifest from Him is greater. So in a sense, to whatever degree I am real, I become more real. And that is why we said the hereafter is more real than this world. And that the experiences in the hereafter are more real than the experiences in this world. And why this world would seem like a dream or unreal. And the Quran talks about it as well, that when we raise them, we will ask them, Kam labithum, how long did you live in your previous life, meaning this world? قالوا لبثنا يوما أو بعض يوم. They will say we tarried for a day or half a day. So whether you live for 60 years or 80 years or 90 years or 120 years, it will feel like you lived here for a day or half a day when you compare to the reality of what we awaken to. And therefore, the greater my awareness, the more my presence endures, and therefore everything is more intense. The pleasure is more intense, the pain is more intense, and I see myself now as being more real because I'm closer to reality to that degree, because there's greater awareness and there's a lot of that cause and effect and veils between me and reality that is removed. And therefore then, instead of seeing myself as just a socio-political animal who happens to be here by chance, by accident, struggling for survival, I see myself now as an origination of reality, as a fitrah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is one thing. The other advantage of pursuing this whole idea of spirituality and wayfaring and journeying to Allah and undertaking a spiritual journey is, from a human psychology perspective as well, there is a natural need and curiosity to know the truth. Carl Jung, by saying, if a person does not proceed towards self-knowledge, neurotic symptoms may arise in such people. And these symptoms are widely defined, including, for instance, phobias, psychosis, and depression. What he's trying to say is, if a life is lived unexamined, if when we have the time and opportunity we don't ask these important questions, who am I? Why am I here? Is there a purpose to life? Why do I have a spiritual side to me? Why am I curious about spirituality? Is there a higher truth? How do I go about pursuing it? If I don't pursue this, then later in age, because that life was unexamined, then these symptoms may manifest in a person, where you will find them having all kinds of fears and phobias, or psychosis, or depression, or just unhappiness with life that cannot be explained. So there were many other advantages to what we have said, that if a person starts attributing all goodness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a person surrenders and sees himself as being completely connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it eliminates things like jealousy within communities, it eliminates things like self-pride and thinking oneself is better than others. It also removes the fear of death, because now if I'm just a sign pointing towards reality, and ultimately it is only God that is real, then the only thing that's going to happen to me by death is I'm going to come to greater awareness and greater realization of that reality. I no longer see myself as a physical being who is being forcefully taken to my grave, because I don't see myself as the physical body. So there is a lot of benefit to what we have been discussing, inshallah. And the point that I'm trying to emphasize here is that the pursuit of spirituality, the pursuit of understanding our faith deeper, whether it's Quran, whether it's Hadith, and giving it a philosophical dimension, is not a luxury, is not a nice to have, is not, this sounds interesting, when I have the time and I'm financially independent and I've retired, I'll look for some books or I'll start listening to these lectures. No, this is in a sense a necessity. We don't have to panic and run home and sign up for courses on philosophy, but we certainly have to have this curiosity and take this a little more seriously, that religion is not just about the outward, that everything that is zahir has a batin, that I cannot just be praying for 60, 70, 80 years of my life, bending, bowing, prostrating, but it's not changing me or making any difference to my life. What am I doing? What am I saying? I'm praying, I have no clue what I'm saying. I'm reading the Quran, I'm reading Yasin, I have no idea what I'm saying. This needs to change within us individually, inshallah, and then collectively as a community. And when we do that, then a lot of good things begin to happen. The way we raise our children changes. It puts pressure on those who preach to us as well, because now when we're all of a certain caliber, then those who preach to us have to be able to keep up. Those who teach our children in the madrasa have to keep up, and so on and so forth. If you can recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa alihi. So this was the first part, where I was just sharing some of the advantages that we should also consider. The second part is some of the tips that I would like to offer in how we commence our journey then in spirituality. And as I said, none of these tips are quote-unquote religious, in the sense that I'm not going to give you advice on, try and pray Salatul Layl or fast on Mondays and Thursdays or set aside some time for Quran and reading du'as. These are certainly very, very important, dhikr of Allah and so on. But I'm trying to share some ideas that I'm sure we've all thought about, but just, things that we can adjust in our day-to-day lives. The first thing is that I would encourage myself and all of us to develop a tendency to interact with nature more directly, and then to reflect on it and find an esoteric meaning in the most mundane of things that we observe in nature. What has happened over time is, because we have been so inundated with technology and our lives have become so fast, we live an unnatural life on a day-to-day basis, but we don't notice it. Like, for example, I'm walking down the street, it's fall season, there's a beautiful tree there, bursting with fall colors, but I have no time to look at the tree because I'm in a hurry, or I'm busy on my phone checking messages, right? Slow down, take the time to stop and look at that, because you are nature and you're interacting with nature. You are both pointers and signs pointing to something magnificent, the Creator. So when one of you looks at the other, a lot of magic can happen, but we need to take the time. You see, even the way we live our lives, if you look at the history of human beings, originally we never used to spend so much time indoors the way we do now. Right? Human beings originally built homes as a shelter. It was a place where you only went in to sleep in the night to protect yourselves from the weather and from wild beasts and predators or thieves and things like that. But with time, we brought our kitchen into the house, so we stopped cooking outside. Then we brought our washrooms into the house. Then we brought our bathrooms into the house. Then we had water running in the house. Then we had electricity running in the house. So there was less and less reason to be outdoors. We still went out for work, but now with internet and technology and all, we can also work from home, right? So we tend to spend so much time surrounded with man-made structures, with just walls and just plastic and leather and glass. Especially now as winter approaches, sometimes we go to work and it's dark, and we leave work and it's dark. We just miss sunrise to sunset altogether, right? We haven't seen the day. So it's not easy, certainly, and I know the pace at which life moves here. But when you have opportunities, if you see a beautiful sunset, take the time to see it. Take it as a bonus. If you're stuck in traffic and there's a beautiful sunset, instead of panicking you're stuck in traffic, there's nothing you can do. Enjoy the sunset, right? When the weather's beautiful, spring, fall, just put away the cell phone, Go out to your backyard, sit on the deck, sit on the grass. Let people think, you've lost it a bit, but just sit there, enjoy nature. So that was the first, tip that I can share, that interact with nature, find an esoteric meaning to it. The second tip is that wherever you can, always opt for learning something directly through experience and practically, as opposed to through theory. Instead of learning something by listening to a lecture or reading a book, try and experience it. And I'll give you some examples again very quickly, because nothing can replace direct experience. I always used to hear of this incident about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, that on one occasion he went out into the desert with a group of his companions, and at one point they needed some fire, to light a fire, to cook a meal or stay warm or whatever it was. So he asked them to go fetch some firewood. And they looked around and they said, Ya Rasulullah, there's only sand here, it's a desert. Where are we going to get firewood from? He said, go look. And when they went looking, to their surprise, they started finding twigs here and a little branch there and a little twig there. And before they knew it, everybody was back with a big bundle. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to them, this is an example of sin. It collects in your heart like little twigs. When you look at your life, you think, I'm doing pretty good. For the most part, I'm a good person. I don't have any sins. But all those little sins that you have not repented for, they're like little twigs all over your heart that you don't see. If you sit and reflect over your life and you collect them, you will find there's a big bundle that can light a fire in hell. And therefore you need to find that. And through repentance you come to a higher level of spirituality as well. Now, we've all heard this incident again and again and again. But when did it actually make sense to me? It made sense to me the first time I went camping. I went camping on a serviced site. We put up the campsite. We went to the camp office. We bought firewood. So we bought big logs. Now, those of you who've been camping, you know you can't just light a fire with big logs. You first need little twigs, and you need to start it with little stuff, and then you get to the big wood pieces themselves. Now, the twigs, you have to look for them out there in the wilderness. So we start looking around. Where are we going to find twigs here? You look around, there's only grass. Because you're camping at a serviced site, right? There's only grass. Then you said, let's go look around. And as you walk and start looking more closely, you find a twig here, you find a twig there, you find a twig there, and before you know it, you've come back with a big bundle. And you still don't understand that this is just grass. How did I get so much wood? Now, this experience, now I fully understand what the companions of the Prophet actually experienced, because it's firsthand. The third thing, again, which is tied to these two, is that in order to create this opportunity for enlightenment, we need to slow down. Our lives have become extremely fast, and sometimes we can't help it, but there is a whole cult of being busy. You know, busyness has become a social status, a social symbol. If somebody asks you how's life or how's it going, you know, myself included, we all say, I'm so busy, I don't have time to think, right? Now, if you say you're really busy, that shows you're productive, you've got a life, you're ahead of the game, you're somewhere in the ladder in society. But if somebody asks you, you know, it would be good to have coffee with you, and you're like, yeah, I'm free today, tomorrow, day after, morning, afternoon, anytime, you think, no, this guy's a loser, right? He's got so much time, no, Rocha, like, you know, what has he? That's the thing we think. So we have subliminally come to understand that for you to be somebody, you have to be busy, you have to have no time. Fourth and the final was to reduce addictions, which is something I've talked about time and time again, so I'm not going to get into it. As a conclusion, I don't have a lot of time for Q&A, but I'll try and answer a few questions. But as a conclusion, I want to mention A, B, C, D with a few pointers. A, there is a reality, this is a conclusion to our whole series, there is a reality that is beyond the material world, which is 1, uncreated, 2, it pervades everything, and 3, it remains beyond the reach of human knowledge and understanding. You can never know it, it can only know itself. That's A. B, you approach that reality, that truth, that consciousness, if you want to call it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you approach it by one, distinguishing your ego from your true self. Two, understanding the nature of desire, which is what jihadul nafs is all about. Three, becoming unattached, which is what zuhud is all about. Four, forgetting about individual preferences so that you are not always trying to run away from suffering or fighting for survival, which is what patience or sabr is all about. Five, not working for personal gain, which is what ithar or altruism is all about. Six, redirecting your attention towards that reality, which is what dhikr is all about. Seven, being devoted, which is what taqwa is all about. Eight, being humble. Nine, invoking that reality, which is what dua and supplications is all about. 10, seeking help from a mediating love, which we talked about yesterday, which is what wasila is all about. And finally, you approach this reality by surrendering your self-will to the will of this reality, which is what taslim and being a Muslim is all about. Okay? Now, see, that reality approaches you. This was how you approach that reality. But that reality approaches you in two ways. One is through its grace, what we call lutf ilahi, so directly. And two, through a teacher. That teacher primarily is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And then the two weighty things that he leaves behind, the thaqalain, which is the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So he approaches you through these means. And then further below that, then anything that connects you to this, whether it is the sermon from someone, whether it is a book you read, whether you will find that as you take an interest in spirituality, just when you need it at the right time, you will just chance upon the right lecture or the right book at the library or the right website or the right conversation or the right experience. There is no coincidence in life. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who strive in our ways, we guide them onto our ways. You take one step to him, he takes 10 steps towards you. You walk towards him, he comes running towards you. So when you are ready, the teacher will be ready waiting for you. And finally then, through the process of dying to the false ego, you are reborn spiritually with a higher awareness. And you then transform, because of which you then experience unlimited freedom. So by becoming a slave of Allah, you actually become free. Whereas by refusing to be a slave of Allah, you become enslaved by everything else other than Allah. He frees you and gives you unlimited freedom. And because of that, you are no longer held by the fear of death. You're no longer held by the fear of being criticized and judged by others. You're no longer then enslaved by addictions. You're no longer greedy for temporary material gain or pleasure. And your outlook on suffering completely changes. You have a different worldview on life altogether. If we can recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala I will answer one more question and end. And the reason I'm answering this question again, because I think it is important and I don't think everybody will download the document and read it. And I think this is a very important question, and it's the last, I promise. The question is, how come we know of some people who are enlightened and they're not Muslims? And we speak of enlightenment, you have to go through, the mediating love and go through the Imams and Quran and Ahlul Bayt and the Prophet and follow Islam and spirituality. How does it happen for people who are not Muslims? And again, it's a lengthy discussion and I'm going to be brief. Firstly, we need to understand that enlightenment is not of one level. It's not that when your ego shatters, you're all at one level of enlightenment, right? The reason why even in paradise the journey is infinite is because you continue to grow in enlightenment. So we could argue that there are many degrees, and that even those who have attained enlightenment outside Islam, if they were to come into the fold of Islam and see Islam as the religion of surrender to a higher power, and to understand Quran and Nahjul Balagha and Hadith, then they would attain even higher levels of enlightenment. That is one thing. The other thing is that even when we look at our own faith, last night we spoke about the 313 companions. We are told in hadith that these 313 who will be urafa, they will not all be of the same rank. They will be of varied ranks. Some of them will be superior to others in their understanding of Tawheed, in their enlightenment, and even in their supernatural abilities. Okay? So we are very clear that there is a gradation even in enlightenment. Secondly, this is the point that actually Maulana Rizvi has made in the past, that we, the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, we are not pluralists, but we're also not exclusivists. We are inclusivists. And the difference here is this: a pluralist says there is no one path that is absolutely right. There is no one path or true religion. All religions are equally right. And it doesn't matter which one you follow. At the end of the day, they're all leading to the same place. So no one has the truth. Everyone has a bit of it. That's the pluralist view. Okay? The exclusivist view is that only my path is right, and unless you follow my path, you will go to paradise. Anyone who doesn't follow my path, they're all going to hell. That's the exclusivist view. There is the inclusivist view that we subscribe to, that because there is one God, and because he sent messengers to different parts of this planet, and they all had the same message, therefore the message is one, the path is one. Every time it changed and got skewed, a new prophet came to restore that path. So there has to be one path that is right, because if there wasn't any one path that was right, then the mercy and grace and justice of God would necessitate that he should send another prophet to again restore that path. It wouldn't be fair that he kept restoring it for 124,000 prophets, and now nobody has the right path and he's not sending anyone else. So there has to be one right path. But the other paths as well are not entirely wrong. They all have traces of that truth of varying degrees. And if you understand this, then what we are saying is that Islam is the shortest, fastest, quickest way to enlightenment and salvation and success in the hereafter. Now, if you are a Muslim and you have understood Islam and you have understood Quran and Ahlul Bayt and you have understood this is the right path and the shortest path, if you leave this path and try and find enlightenment through some other path, you will not find it, because that is foolishness. You're on the highway, you've got a tarmac, nice clean road, you're zooming at 150, you say, no, I'm going to walk on thorns and go through valleys and go through the wilderness, and I'm going to go around and take the big round and get to the end that way. Right? It's a huge risk you take. However, if there is an individual who never found out about Islam, who was given the wrong impression of Islam because of some other individuals who spoil the name of Islam by committing acts of terrorism, who give Islam a bad name, or because we don't do our part in sharing the true message of Islam, and they have a wrong understanding of Islam, and they never get to know Imam Ali, they never get to know Nahjul Balagha, they never get to know Quran, but they're still desirous of knowing the truth, and they have some truth, and they keep struggling for it. It's not impossible that they may arrive at the end at the truth, but their path will be rocky, it will be hard, it will be difficult. If anything, we will be questioned, that why did not you do your part in helping them, show them a quicker way to get to me, right? So we have no right absolutely to point at anyone and say this person is going to hell, or this person is a kafir, or this person is this, or this person is that. That is for Allah to decide. Ours is to be preoccupied with ours, to say that if we have the fastest, quickest way to enlightenment, then this is what we need to pursue. So this is again just a brief answer to say that you might see enlightenment in other human beings, and when you do see it, listen to what they have to say, see how it agrees with what you believe and what you understand, because our Imams have taught us, do not see who is saying, see what is being said, seek knowledge even if it's in China. There were no Muslims in China at the time, right? So if you find words of wisdom, even if it was written 100 or 500 years ago, be open to it, be receptive to it, but be knowledgeable in your faith so that you can understand to what degree it agrees with this path of Islam and to what degree it disagrees with it, right? And therefore, it is not any alarm as to why anyone else might find enlightenment. They've just taken a harder, longer journey. In conclusion, what I want to say to all these questions that I've been receiving, and I suspect that I will continue to receive
questions is that ultimately, when all is said and done, we will not understand the answers to our questions through debates and discussions and rationalizing and conceptual understanding. Because as we said, the truth lies with ilm al-huduri, not with ilm al-husuli. So no matter how many questions you ask me, every time I give you an answer, you will have another question to that answer. Because that is the nature of the mind. It's trying to grasp something that is beyond its realm. The only way we will truly understand something to a point where we have absolute conviction and then there is no question after that, where there is just an understanding and a realization, is if we can have direct experience of the answer that we're trying to conceptualize. And that will happen only through spiritual struggle, through transformation, through change. And of course, we have the best guides in the Quran and in Muhammad and Ali Muhammad alayhim afdalus salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Tonight is the 13th night of Muharram, and we continue to pay our respects to the household of the Prophet in their suffering. Last night we talked briefly about the musibah of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam as they came into Kufa. We need to keep in mind how the world was at the time, 1400 years ago. News did not travel as fast as it does today. We said the ripple effect of what happened in Karbala perhaps had not even reached Medina in these nights that we are discussing. In fact, even the people in Kufa were not aware of the tragedy that had happened in Karbala to the extent that it had actually happened. Why? Because they were aware that Muslim bin Aqil had come to Kufa. They were aware that a lot of Kufans had pledged allegiance to them. But as soon as Ibn Ziyad entered Kufa, he clamped down on the people. He set a curfew in place. People were not allowed to leave their homes. So there was no news coming into Kufa, no news leaving outside Kufa. A few individual families may have known. The family of Habib knew that Habib had left in the middle of the night and gone towards Imam Hussein alayhi salam. The family of Muslim bin Awsaja knew that Muslim had left and gone out towards Karbala. But in fact, they did not even know that Habib had been killed or Muslim had been killed until this qafila came back into Kufa. So there were a lot of individuals who were waiting for Imam Hussein to come, and perhaps at this point they were still thinking that Imam Hussein might show up with an army and overthrow Ibn Ziyad. But there were also people who had been brainwashed by Ibn Ziyad when he decorated the city, when he brought out all the riffraff, and he tried to convince the people that these were rebels, these were heretics, na'udhu billah, these were people who rebelled against the Caliph Yazid, and therefore they must be shamed and they must be humiliated. And of course there were people who had betrayed the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam as well. And as this qafila was brought in, and we mentioned last night that, you know, with the heads of the martyrs on spears and Imam Zainul Abidin tied in chains, bleeding from his wounds and the shackles and chains, the women weeping on saddleless camels, being paraded through the bazaars with their children on their laps. And there's all sorts of reactions amongst the people. Some are throwing water at them, some are throwing fire at them, some are jeering and booing at them, some are laughing at them, some of them are saying to them, you deserved this, some of them are mocking them. And they are trying to show the people and open their minds and tell them what has been happening.